You are listening to the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show hosted by Doug DeVitri, your source to increasing sales, productivity, and the customer experience. In each show, we will sit down with world-class thought leaders to discuss latest trends, innovative concepts, and ideas to keep you ahead of the curve using the latest technology.
Welcome back to the show. Very special guest today, Tom Winninger, who's authored many books on sales and sales management. Tom, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Doug. Things
Tell
are
me
exciting out there in the field. I'm always amazed at how much change can happen in a short period of time. It's crazy.
Well, tell me on the minds of sales managers right now, and there's all these things that are going on with technology and different options and different ways to sell and different strategies, and the entire sales force out there is really confused. How does a sales manager start to get specific as far as which parts of the process to remediate first?
Well, I think what's happening to all of us is we're becoming specialists rather than generalists. I mean, when I started off in sales management years ago, we were training people to 44 skill sets. Then we pared it down to 23 skill sets. Now, in all honesty, when I coach salespeople, i.e. coach salespeople, that is create a leadership role with the salespeople rather than manage them, I am very narrow in my coaching. So when I look at salespeople and say, what's the one thing they really need to be good at? That if they were good at that, everything else would fall in line. If they're good at that, they don't need to be as good a closer. If they're as good at that, they don't need to ask as many questions. If they're as good at that, they don't need to handle as many objections. And that one thing to me has come back: engagement. If my people can learn how to engage up front at a very deep level, which brings a relationship, everything else seems to work out. If they can't engage, either because it's not their gift or because they can't develop the skills or language of engagement, then we miss it. And in the old days, I used to call it 10-3-1. If our guys could talk to 10 people, they would engage 3 and they would end up selling 1. And we worked on that frequency all the time. So did you talk to 10 people? And of those 10 people, how many people did you engage? And how many people actually went ahead and took advantage of what we had to offer? Today, we're up to about 6 out of 10 because we're not focusing on pure activity of contact. We're focusing on depth of engagement. So it's still a balancing act. I mean, you still have to say, as Brian Tracy always said, you got to see him to sell him. Well, you got to talk to him to sell him. And Brian and I were always on the same page about that. But are you effective? And how do you define effective in 24 words or less? And if effectiveness is engaging them at a personal level so they're willing to trust you and share with you the things that really, the characteristics they're really using to make the final decision, or are they the decision maker, or are they just an influencer, or whatever they are, can you get there? And that's critical today. So the majority of my focus for sales managers is directors of engagement. So I really call myself a director of engagement in spite of the fact I'm a sales manager, so to speak, because I want to title myself for what I help them do. And the beauty of that is I've got to do the same thing they do. I think that's the second part of being in sales management today is how do I ask them to care if I don't care? How do I ask them to gauge if I'm a lousy if I'm blowing by them in the hallway or blowing by them on a phone, and then I say, well, you guys need to be better engagers. Well, that's ridiculous. Oxymoron stuff.
Well, that's great, Tom. Can you mentioned 2 things. One is the language, and then 2 would be the skills. Can you give me or give us some examples of some language you would do to maybe engage somebody at a higher level, or maybe some skills that kind of play a critical role?
To me, the language of engagement is the quality of the question. So the quality of the question to me dictates the quality of the answer. Mike, I know that I'm going to pretend you're Mike. Mike.
Hi, Tom.
I know you've considered a number of things like this before. What one thing did you take a look at and seriously consider but did not go ahead? To me, that's a deep engagement question. Now, maybe that's not your first question, but that's a deep engagement question. Mike, I know that sometime down the road, either sooner or later, we're going to come to the point where you're going to be called to make a decision. can you give me one thing that you're going to use to make that decision that will help me out up front so I can set it up so you can really see whether it's right for you or not? These are deep engagement questions to me. And in the midst of this, hopefully, anybody listening or watching this says, gee, when did your cares? I do care. You see, I framed myself early on. My dad kind of gave me the basics of selling, when I was like 12. And Dad said we don't sell anything. We engage people at a level of interest so then they can evaluate the height of their need related to what we're offering. So, and that's a gap. That's a gap between what we bring and where they're at, and how we narrow that gap by bringing them closer, not by closing them into it. That was my father, God bless him, still alive, 91 years old. And so Dad always said, my job is not to sell, my job is to engage somebody who has some level of need for what I'm offering so they can evaluate how valuable that need is for them and how it works in their situation.
Sure, and I can imagine, because we're all busy. The chances or the opportunities to get face to face with some decision makers, it's a lot harder. Everyone's pressed for time, and even sometimes they make decisions based off of the research that they do online before you even get that opportunity to maybe ask that question. What would you recommend some ways of maybe engaging someone in order to have that initial opportunity to ask some of those high trust level questions?
Well, the easiest way for me to do it is that I frame their pain, not my product. So in other words, let's say, for example, it's technology. And I say, the passion of technology is oftentimes technology is a waste. Its application is priceless. What is the primary application for you today in your business, whether it's based on a technology or not? So go after what their challenges are in their business, not the product's specifications. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah. I do.
I get to more decision makers in application than I do in specification, because they want to talk to me if I know their problem. They don't want to talk to me if I've got a product. Bingo. It's like books that sell today or 10 ways not to fail versus 10 ways to succeed. I can sell more books to guys who want to find out the ways not to fail than people to succeed. The other thing I found out that in today's marketplace, you have to have convergent multiple contacts. So you email, you mail, you text, you tweet, you do everything, and you do it very short, and you pinpoint what I call the highest need level. So if I know the biggest challenge they have is that they're not managing their database effectively, okay, I talk about how many people that are in their database are wasting their time, not how many people in their database could be successful customers. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. It gets right down to the actual problem that they have, especially CRM being one of the top ones where sales professionals maybe refuse to use for whatever reason. Yeah.
So let me pretend you again. So Doug, and this might be a text. I speculate one of the problems you might have, since I deal with a lot of other companies, is ... Is that correct? Open-ended question at the end. Don't respond and don't put anything else in it. All right? Then I mail them a little card, been thinking about you. One of the major problems I find with companies like yours is ... The other day, we just hired a consultant in our own company because the guy sent me a note and said, what happens if you don't manage? Who manages if you don't manage? Is there a gap between you and the effectiveness of the salespeople? And I said, yeah, there's no middle management around here. If I'm not doing it, nobody's doing it. And we hired the guy. Not because he had an answer. No, he's got great answers. I mean, he's done really well. Chris has done really well. But, and he has a nice focus. His nice focus is, if your salespeople can't manage themselves and you're working 24/7 trying to manage people who can't even manage themselves, which means you're always going to have them and they're never going to leave you because you're taking care of them. I'm tired of taking care of them. But that's all a part of leadership, not management in sales. Do I lead or do I manage? Am I helping my salespeople understand what their strengths are, or am I just beating them up on their weaknesses all the time? And that's another big thing I've learned the hard way. In sales management for years, I made the mistake of trying to get my guys better at what they can't do, rather than get them better at what they can do. because all the guys have a gift. Every one of them's got something they can do that's really natural to them. How do we play that card first, and then do the other things? You know, if you're really an engager, how do I get you? How do I position that so if you're not that good a closer, at least you engage at a level where closing doesn't have as much pressure, you know, and then give you the words for closing, which is most cases with these kinds of guys, alternate choice close, you know. Mike, if you're going to go ahead and make a decision today, would it be this one or this one? And Mike says, I don't know. I say, well, let's walk through it together, you know, at a level of trust. So I think that's critical.
Yeah, and looking at those opportunities that you had discussed, how big of a role do you see data playing in some of the executive decisions on how to, choose market A or choose market B, or maybe you take a sales professional who needs to improve, let's say, making a number of calls or number of appointments. What type of data do you see being critically important rather than getting
involved in that? Because many of the clients that I have personally come to me for some frustration they have with data management. You know, big data, lots of information, CRM applications that don't work because most of them don't work. I say the important thing about data for me is how predictable can the data be? In other words, can the data give me predictability, or does it just report activity? So what's predictability? So if the data can tell me what they bought, and I know what goes with what they bought, but they didn't buy what goes with what they bought, then the data can tell me that's what they should buy, right?
Yeah.
That's predictability to me. The other thing I like about data is it manages my contact frequency. So can it tell me when not to call them, you know, versus when to call them? I mean, that's huge for me, you know, because I know my odds go up about 75% if my timing is perfect. You know, and about half the guys I talk to, you know, they're going to be vulnerable. That's probably the wrong word, but they're going to be accepting of me before 8 o'clock in the morning. After 8 o'clock, they're not going to talk to me, and they're certainly not going to talk to me after 11:30. So if my data can help me identify when not to call them, so I know when to call them, that's critical, and that's what I want to do with the guys. You know, I've been around CRM applications since it began with recipe cards. That's how it all started. You know, we all had recipe cards and we put our customer on them, and we had a little box in January, February, March, and then under each month we had 4 weeks, and then we took the little card, we put it back where we thought we should call, and then that beginning of that week, hopefully on Sunday evening, you'd pull out the cards and line them up that week, and you know, that was CRM application. What screwed it up was technology. We all did pretty good with that deal because we're not going to keep cards for people we're not going to sell something to. Today, I keep data on people I'm never going to sell anything to. And it just gets in the way. You know, that's why I think that the data can be, technology can be too consuming because it's got too much in my face. How simple can I make it? What are the 5 characteristics of that prospect, suspect, or customer do I need to track? And how does that information help me engage them in a frequency that creates a relationship, right? Because frequency does create relationship. I mean, if you go out on a date once every 6 months, don't tell me they're a friend. The frequency isn't high enough to get there.
Yeah.
If you're going out once a week and you're arguing about something, personally you got a relationship. It's the same with prospects. If the prospect doesn't disagree with something I have to say, personally, it's a pretty weak relationship. If the prospect or suspect, whatever you want to call them, has the willingness and openness to say, Tom, this is not for me, or I just don't get it. You know, I love that because I call that engagement. That's bounce, man. That's bounce. That's no brick wall there. You know, my dad used to play tennis, and he always said, don't play against a brick wall. And when you get in selling, don't do the same thing. It's all your energy. You know, a person makes a call, calls every week, calls every month, whatever they're doing, and they're not getting anything. Dump them. I don't have the time and energy today. But I do think a couple of things that are critically important. I think it gets back to you is I think follow-up is almost as valuable as initial engagement. The minute I walk out of that appointment, contact, or whatever, I text them a thank you and tell them I look forward to seeing them again. And in that text, I put down what we're going to talk about when we get back together. It's the same with my kids. I text them after we get together for dinner, say, love to be with you. It was great. And they're immediately texting me back, great to see you too, Dad. And that immediacy of the thank you is something the textable technology brought to us, because we used to write notes and put them in the mail. No immediacy. So it's a great time. It's a great time, but you got to be narrow, not be broad. You got to be a specialist. You can only expect what you're willing to give to managing other people, and you've got to see what is the highest purpose for what we're doing, not what is the purpose for what we're doing. Are we restructuring organizations so they're more effective in the marketplace to be leaders, or are we just trying to make people competitive? I don't sell any products to anybody just to help you be competitive. I want you to be the leader.
Well, Thom, you are definitely a leader. You are definitely a great friend. I appreciate you sharing your many years of wisdom with us.
I plowed through snow to get to this interview. And I physically did that.
Well, look on the bright side. You saved a flight to St. Louis.
That's right. I saved on the flight. Didn't have to sit on an airplane to come to see you.
Well, it's been a treat, Thom. Thanks again.
All right.
You are listening to the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show, hosted by Doug DeVitri, your source to increasing sales, productivity, and the customer experience. In each show, we will sit down with world-class thought leaders to discuss latest trends, innovative concepts, and ideas to keep you ahead of the curve using the latest technology.
Are you ready for more meetings in less time with less expense? Screen to Screen Selling has answers. Screen to Screen Selling is the fastest way to increase sales, productivity, and the customer experience. Screen to Screen Selling is a mindset before it becomes a skill set. Let's look at your beliefs.
Or even like join.me.
Receive access to upcoming episodes of the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show, special announcements, and insider resources. DeVitri.co/screen to screen. Order Screen to Screen Selling from 800-CEO READ, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Books A Million, and McGraw-Hill Education.